Good morning, everybody. My name is Samantha Mirabal with Mocha's application team doing our Design Shop talk today. If you have questions while we're live, please type them in on the chat. Don't send them privately. I don't see those. Good morning, my YouTube. Good morning. Thanks for joining. All right, so let me check both platforms and make sure they're actually alive. It looks like there's Facebook and there's YouTube, so we are good to go. Excellent. All right, so I'm going to, good morning, Beth and Chuck and T. Thanks for joining today. I will say I have one question. So if you have questions, start typing them. All right, so I didn't get a whole lot of questions sent in ahead of time for this week. I did, just so I don't cut off super early, grab a graduation cap to digitize just so we can have something to look at, and maybe I'll spur some conversation that way. But if you have questions, please start typing them in. And good morning, Kyle. Thanks for joining. So, like I said, I don't have a lot of content that was sent in ahead of time, so type in. All right, I will go ahead, and it's a interesting one. Any tips for sewing on silk honor stoles? So those things are interesting, right? Because the silk, you gotta be careful. It tends to pucker and do weird things, right? So the name of the game on this is figuring out ways to hold it still, keeping your densities not super, like don't do really heavy fills on it, and stabilizing it well. All right. I personally do these by fusing on, like I sew them myself. So I actually take the silk, iron on a fusible backing, hoop it with some stabilizer, and then sew it. That's how I prefer to do them. And then I sew the stole myself. I like the results better. I also like that I can control and not have this embroidery seen on the back side, right? But keys to sewing on this is, using, oh, we got an article up there for you. So, like I said, it's a challenging thing. In the article, they talk about using a smaller needle, right? That's the smaller needle. That when you get larger hole sizes. It'll poke some of the threads. You can get runs and things like that. So going down in needle size. And this is what I was just talking about, keeping the density of the design down. So not having really heavy fills and things like that. It's just not a good idea. The auto mode, essentially when you increase the minimum, what you're doing is not letting the thread pull as tight. So that's going to be done on your machine. That's a setting. And then basically use a heavy tear away. Is there a way to say, let's see. So that's pretty much all I was going to cover. Anyway, so yeah, that's what I would suggest for that. Okay. But like I said, I prefer to make them myself rather than trying to float a stole, because when you float a stole, then how do you hold it, right? So if you pin it, you end up with holes in the silk. Those are kind of hard to make them go away. If you use a sticky stabilizer, okay, that holds it nice, but then you have two layers that are shifting. So what do you do with that? Well, then if you do a basting stitch, you're adding holes. So there's a lot of complications on there, but the name of the game is going to be hold it still and use as heavy of a tear away as you can. And then see what you can get from there. Let's see. We have some typed in questions. I like that. Let's see. Let me scroll down. Is there an easy way, like button icons, to go back and forth from Melco and DesignShop lettering where it keeps the design? I use the same Alt-Tab, right? So Alt-Tab. So when you, oh, that's on the wrong monitor. Let's see if I can get it to do it over here. No. Okay. I broadcast monitor 2, and it's only showing up on monitor 1. When you on your keypad on your keyboard, hit the alternate key and the tab. That'll pop up a thing that will have windows, and you can just tab. So keep holding the alternate key down and then hit tab a few times, and that will kind of scroll through the different things. Okay. So. No, Leo, my dog. Let me have a friend come get my dog out of here. Give me one moment. I apologize. All right, he's going to lay down. So hopefully he stays laying down. I'll leave him be. All right, is there an easy, we just did that one. And we're down. So do you have any best practices for creating patches? All right, so Kyle, is that question relative to on the machine or in digitizing or both? I'll hold on that and come back. Is there a way to save the settings for a particular design, like act feed, speed settings, when we save the design? From, oh goodness, it's been like a million years since I've done that. Tools, Milko OS settings. So you can come in here and type in things and save it in the file. When you go and load the file in the OS, you have to click that button where you load settings from file. There's a button. Let's see if I have it in my little. Like I said, I don't use it, so I'm like, oh goodness, you're making me think in the Wayback Machine here. Where is the button? That button right there. That loads settings from the file. I believe it's that one. So yeah, that's what I would use. But yeah, you can. The other way you can do it is run it on DesignShop, save it from, run it in the OS, save it from the OS, and then when you reload it, you can go and click on that button again and load files. Okay, so that was Beth. Hopefully that helps there. Do you have any best practices for creating patches? We'll come back to that because I think you just typed in DesignShop. All right. Oh, load settings from design. We did get you a link on that, Beth, so you'll see that in the comments as well. All right, so let's go to DesignShop and make some patches. This is an example, so I have stuff to do if you guys didn't have questions. Cool. All right, so creating patches. Let's do a circle patch, right? So I'm going to do walk, circle, left click, hold my shift key, drag. That makes a perfect circle. All right. So first and foremost, let's say that what size do we want it? Maybe we wanted a typical 3-inch circle. And I'm going to copy that, paste that, and give it another color. All right, so I have my placement stitch. I have my tack down. For my tack down, I prefer that to be a bean stitch. That is 100% my personal preference. A lot of people don't do that. A lot of people will use a normal stitch. Some of them will be a normal with a retrace. A normal stitch is just a running stitch. It's super fast, which is why people like it, right? It's just one piece of thread. It goes, puts a needle penetration, moves to the next spot, needle penetration, moves over and keeps marching away doing that, right? If you do a retrace, it sews all the way around once and then goes back over itself. So now you end up with 2 pieces of thread down. Now, if you go into the settings, you can also have this option for an offset. If you add the offset, it will stagger the needle penetration. So rather than going back in the same holes, so if it goes around the circle once with one set of holes, when it comes back, it'll go in another location and not back in the same spot. If the offset's 0, it's going to go back in the same spot. When doing patches, I prefer, if I'm going to do a retrace, I prefer the offset. Again, it holds it better, and for me, it's all about holding the fabric down. But I typically use bean without a retrace. And that's just, like I said, that's me. Yeah, so like I said, what you do for the placement, it really varies between who you talk to, and that's okay. Whatever works for you is the correct answer. So, all right, so placement. You sew that on a piece of stabilizer or a piece of plastic, whatever you're using. Then you're going to grab your fabric. Oops, cover up that thing. So I'm just mocking this up for you, right? So you're going to cover up that in the hoop, the placement, and then you're going to run your tack down stitch. Cool. Now you grab scissors, the little curved bill things. Scissors work well. I personally, I know I've mentioned this a bunch, I like using a seam ripper because that razor's super sharp. I break off the point so it doesn't catch the stabilizer of the fabric. And then I use the plastic end to go against the fabric. So then I just push this around, cutting the fabric close to the line, right? So what does that leave you with? So instead of that, now I've got you know, a piece of fabric sewn down and kind of cut along the edge, right? Cool. So from here, now I need to secure it a little bit better because I don't know about you, but if I'm cutting stuff in place with scissors or whatever I'm doing, I tend to cut every now and then a piece of this thread because I like getting it close. So in those cases, we still want to tack it down well. So I've got my placement, my tack down. I'm going to hold the shift key down and click on the single line, and then I'm going to change that to a tackle. Then I'm going to make this a little bit wider because I like a nice solid tack down to cover up and hold it down in place. All right, from here, now it's time to decorate your patch, right? So whatever you're going to put on there, whether it's text, you know, designs, whatever you're doing, right? So you're going to put whatever you're doing to your patch, you do that now. And that's another color, that's another color. Cool. The only reason we have those color changes in there are so that we can have applique stops if we need them on the machine, right? So, all right, I did that. We did our decoration. The final step is to have a satin border around the edge. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to paste that here. So I did a Control C. I pasted it after lettering. I'm going to change that to a satin stitch, make that something wider, and poof, I got a patch. All right. So you asked for tips and tricks. So that would be kind of the basics of it. From there, now you can poke it out of the plastic. If you sewed it straight into a twill, so let's say you're using a poly twill and you just hooped it, you sewed a bunch of patches, then you can get a hot knife out and cut it out. I have a mild tremor, so that does not work for me at all. I end up not hot knifing it in a beautiful manner, so that doesn't work. But people can do that all day long beautifully. So let's see. That would create your patch. I'm trying to think anything else relevant. What else, Kyle, do you want to know about patches? I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You create your shape, do your bean stitch, your tack down, whatever design you want, and then your satin stitch, right? And go about business. You can, instead of cutting it in place, you can pre-cut your shapes. I've seen a lot of people do that. So there's multiple ways to do that. So I can actually sew on a piece of fabric that placement stitch and just sew a bunch of my shapes, unhoop it, grab my scissors and cut it out where I can hold things and I'm not working around a hoop. And now I've got a piece of fabric sewn like that, that when I go to do my actual patch, I sew this down. You know, I sew my circle. Now I have a pre-cut shape. I can just, you know, use some spray adhesive, stick it to my material and move along. So you could do that. You could take this entire thing right here and you can save it off as an SVG and take it to a laser or a fabric cutter, right? So you can use that. If you use synthetic materials, you can always, and synthetic being most stabilizers are polyester, so that's easy, or plastics, things like that. If you use a poly twill, so polyester, not cotton, right? Then you can seal the edges really easy. Different type of border on there. Let's say you don't want a satin border, you want it to look more like a faux marrow, right? So you can come down here to, where are they? They're here, sorry. There they are. Faux patch border. Oh, that needs to be not a decorative, that needs to be not a single line, that needs to be that one. There we go. Decorative, and then faux patch border. Wrong way, do the other one, that one. There you go. And then that one, there you go. So you can do a faux patch border, and that one will do that chain stitch and make it more approximated to a marrow stitch. So you have that as an option as well, right? So it really, I'll tell you when I use this one though, I do put a light satin stitch underneath it just because I like a fuller, a really thick border. Again, that's a me thing, not a that's the way it's done thing. So that's just my personal preferences. Okay, we did get you some link on some patch recommendations, so there's that in the comments. So you can take a look at that and let me quick look. All right, that's what you wanted. Outstanding. All right, let me scroll back up because there's some other ones typed in next. Let's see. When using fonts, is there a way to change the color of separate letters individually? Absolutely. All right, so I got some text here. See those boxes, those X's? Each one of those, if I click on it, now that letter is selected. So now I can come over here and make each letter an individual color without having to break it apart. So it's that simple. Now when you're typing text, right, so S, I can type, all I'm doing is I'm typing, I come over here, I click on a different color, and now I type another letter. I click over here, click on a color, type another letter. So you can do it as you're going, right? So let me type an actual name. S, and then blue, A, then orange, M. There you go. So I can click on the color palette, changing it. And if those aren't the colors I want, the color palette doesn't have it, that's okay. Then I can come over here and just change the colors. Or in my color palette, I can go, hey, that blue was wrong. I wanted 1893. And, oops, that blue was wrong, excuse me. And I wanted 1893. So you can change the colors around. It's making me mad. I wanted 1893, for goodness sake. I just did it. There. That one. Apply. I don't wanna. That's fun. There you go. Now it's 1893. That one I might want to be 1924. So color 1924. There we go. And maybe that green I want to be the 1748, which happens to be one of these over here anyway. Nope, I guess not. 1748. There we go. So maybe you want those colors instead. So you can always modify them after the fact. Okay. Scrolling down. Oh my goodness. You were typing out each letter individually. That would be frustrating. Yeah, don't do that. This is way faster. All right. So let's scroll back up. Did that. Okay. How do I create a double applique using a vector file? Okay, so double applique, what type of applique are we talking about? Like a name and the two fabrics around a name, maybe? Is that what you're looking at? Or just multiple pieces of fabric? Nicole, if you can clarify, I'll come up with an example and we'll do it. While I'm waiting for you, Nicole, let me see. Rusty asks, what's the fastest way to change the sew out direction, say for a hat, bottom up, center out? Yeah, that's a loaded question right there. If it's text, it's super easy. If it's anything else, you have to redigitize it. So there's no real, you have to think about it specifically for that application to be bottom up, center out. I will say, I've gotten into the habit where left chest logos, I digitize them as if they're going on a hat, because there's nothing wrong with sewing a left chest center out, bottom up. It will sew perfectly fine on a left chest. And now I can put that left chest logo on a hat without having to do anything, right? So I always plan for my left chest logos to be hat files as it is. That way I don't have to worry about it. Text, changing it, simple, right? Oh, goodness, Sam, text, whatever. There you go. All right, so text is simple, right? You go into the properties, you go down here, and you say, I'm going to go bottom to top, center out, apply, done. All right, so text is easy. But when you are looking at actual designs, let's see, let me find a hat design. There, I'll go. Yeah. Where are my files? Class files, sorry. And then where's I like this design. It's just pretty. It sews out. So cool. Anyway. So this guy right here is just an example of a hat design, right? So if you do a playback of it, just to see how it goes, it's all done manually, right? So where you plan it out, each of those, so rather than them making this one fill, it's split so that you can automatically plan it to be center out, bottom to top, right? So it's just a matter of planning it out, right? So anyway, this design sews beautifully. Are there any issues digitizing all flats to use the same principles of hat digitizing? In my opinion, no. Actually, I know a lot of really advanced digitizers. That's what we all do. Because it's a good practice in general, because when you push center out, like even if you don't worry about bottom to top, if all you're doing is center out and you're finishing as you go, that's all a good practice as it is, right? So it's, in my opinion, it doesn't hurt anything to do it that way. All right. So, Nicole, let me go back. But yeah, Rusty, it's changing the file. You're really going to have to work your way through it and think about it, rearrange the elements, and figure it out. So it's essentially redigitizing it for a hat. So I always just start that way to begin with. All right, so a sport team name applique was, all right, so I forget which fonts are like that. Athletic Script, maybe? I don't know. All right, I'm going to make that, and you want to do it applique, so you probably want it in front of a shirt or something like that. And up. Probably doing this. I don't know. Let's say that's what you want. Okay. I'm going to center it. I'm going to come over here, and this is just because I don't have art. That's the only reason I'm doing this. I assume you have art. So you have art, great. I don't, so I'm making art, so I have something to digitize. So another 40. And you wanted a double applique. Oh, that'll be pretty. Okay. That'll do. All right, so I'm just, this is really, sorry, there you go. So I've got green, I've got white, and my name. All right, so I have some art. So Nicole, is that close enough to a similar example of what you're wanting? Hopefully it is. I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger because I have a feeling, no, it'll be all right. Okay, cool. All right, so when you're doing this, typically you wanna stack these fabrics, right? So I start on the back and work my way forward and then do the design, right? So just like we did for that patch file, it's pretty much the same digitizing, right? So if you've got the art here, then what I would do is take my first fabric that I want down. It's a vector. That's what I converted this into. So shift, click. Now I have a placement stitch. So if I turn this off, there, I've got my placement stitch. That's gonna be first. All right, so copy, paste. Oh, yeah, you could do it in, so Nicole just said, I didn't know I could add a border in DesignShop. I was doing it in Vector Illustrator and pulling it in. Yeah, that's a new feature to the new DesignShop. It's fantastic. You can tell I did that pretty quick, right? And I just used it to then convert it over. But yeah, so there's my placement. There's the tack down. So I'm going to do that as a bean stitch, and then I'm going to copy and paste that again. Control, click on the single line center and make that a tackle. Cool. That's really thin. I don't like thin tackles. That's, again, that's a me thing. That's just my personal preferences. I don't like it. So I like them thicker. All right, so I've got that. Well, now I've got this next, so that's this piece of fabric sewn down. All right, now what do I want to do? I want to put this piece of fabric down. So this one, by the way, if I were physically doing this, I would have to pre-cut this, just kind of an FYI. This, trying to cut on the machine, is for me a hard pass. If I were going to be cutting this on the machine, I would actually modify the shape to, let's go ahead, actually I'm going to pretend I'm do it two ways. So if I'm doing it this way, where that's the actual shape I want, I'd sew that off somewhere or cut it on my laser and bring it over, because trying to get scissors into this tiny little area is a recipe for throwing the hoop across the room for me. Because I'm that childish with it. Instead, what I would do is, if I were going to cut it on the machine, I would delete this stuff here. All right, so what did I just do? Sorry. I used this guy right here, select custom point or custom point selection, select around those and hit the delete key. Now I have art, and same with that sharp point. That sharp point, I don't like if I'm cutting them manually on the machine, so I just delete that too. So the rest of those I could probably do, but I'd rather just fix it. So these are the sorts of things that when I'm thinking about the application of how I want to do it, if I'm doing it in the hoop, I'm going to do different than if I'm cutting with a laser. Okay, so clean it up, cool. So same thing, I'm going to select this, hold my shift key down, click on this. That gives me a placement stitch. Now I copy paste, change it to a bean stitch, give it another color. Hold my shift key down, click on this, change that to a tackle of 30. Cool. All right, so yay. And if you're doing a tackle applique, that might be good enough and you're done, right? So then you've got your text on top. Poof. This needs to be a different color though, green. There you go. I like that white. That's better. All right. So then if you want satin stitches, you can add them, things like that. A lot of these athletic wears are done with polyester poly twills that are heat sealed along the edges. So they leave this nice tackle twill edge on it and just call it done. All right, Nicole, does that help? Okay. Any advice on 3mm foam for hats? I mean, make sure your designs are digitized for puff. So we do have a bunch of articles on that. You would have make sure your active feeds are set for puff. Pick your presser foot all the way up before you run it. Trying to think what else. So your active feed's going to change. So either increase your active feed or use the puff setting, whichever is. Some of the machines don't have the puff setting, so it depends on what version of software you use. Trying to think what else. I mean, that's pretty much it. The puff is pretty straightforward. You just, do all the embroidery first. That's the only other thing. So if you've got embroidery and then one aspect is puff, do all the embroidery, lay the puff down, and then do your puff as the last step. Rip it off. There are techniques that you can do for puff that I personally like, but they add a lot of stitches. So for instance, I can do the puff sew out, right, with one width of a satin, right? So let's just say I'm doing a circle, just because I can draw it quick, right? So let's say I've got a puff circle. That's 40 points, right? And my density on that is top stitching, turn off auto. That's what I'm going to say 2.5. I really want a density closer to 1.9 to 2, but I don't know. Let's say it's 2. There we go. So what you can do is copy and paste that and use a slightly higher density on the first one. And then for the one that goes over it, one that instead of being 40 points will be something bigger. So let's maybe 48. And what that does is you would sew this first one, you'd rip the puff off, and then you would sew this one. I like it because, cleaning up puff annoys me. It's just, again, a me thing. I can get my heat gun and melt all the little pokies, and that's fine. Which is probably quicker than doing this, quite frankly. But I sew one set, pull the puff off, and then I sew another satin over top, covering up all the pokies so I don't have to worry about it. It adds a ton of stitches, but it makes me happy. All right, so let's see. Let me scroll back up. But yeah, that's puff, a technique for puff you can do. How would you go about taking a photo and making a sew out, such as an old fire truck? eyeballing it, right? So you'd go through and so, all right, let me take that back. I tend to take photos on an iPad and trace the shape and turn it into color blocks, just so I have something that's easier for me to see as far as what works for thread. A lot of times photos have so many shades to it that when you're looking at them, you've got to kind of put your visualization cap on and figure out what colors you're actually going to use, right? So let's see. Old fire truck. Ooh, that one's cool. I was just Googling. Boy, some of these are really cool. But like the shine, the white. So do you want to do that, or do you want to just use stitch directions to kind of get the light to reflect off of it differently? So up here, you can certainly add a little fill area right there, right, to kind of approximate that and make it go along the curve. But, you know, and then you've got darker red over here versus the lighter red. It's all, of course, one color, but just looking at it, there's shading to it. So ways you can always kind of work on that is with stitch direction, right? So stitch direction, as you change it, light hits it differently. So you can get some of those effects using one thread color. So sew it all red, for instance, but by doing different stitch directions, it's going to give it more depth and more, make it look more like there's different shades of thread in there. And it's simply because when the light hits it, it looks different. If you want to see that effect, practically speaking, you can do a really simple sew out, right? So I can take a square, right? Just digitize something small and easy that you can sew. So digitize that and then change the stitch directions all over for different ones. So this first one, the stitch direction's going that way, this one's going that way. Then I can take both of these, copy, paste, mirror them, move it down. Okay, so you can do things like this. Just change the stitch direction, sew it out all in one color, and what you'll see is it actually looks different. So if you want to just see that effect, it's an idea that you can do just to try it out. Is, you know, sew out things with the same color thread but different stitch directions, and what you'll notice there. So as far as how do you go about sewing it, is you trace it, right? So I would go through and think about this from back to front and work your way through it. So, you know, this is kind of standalone, but if I were just looking at the light, I would do this bottom piece first, then this part here, then I'd probably come do this side border with this guy, and then the top, because that's on top, right? So the fill and then the border around it. Now, this is the art to it, right? One, the color, you know, how many thread colors are you going to use? Are you going to try to do shading with a darker gray in there? Are you going to try to do all that? Or it's just going to be one and you're applying the different stitch directions and calling it good. So, you know, that's 100% personal preference on how you want to work on it. Okay. But like even with this ladder, right, I would do the rungs and then come back and do the side pieces and do that all single line centers. So single line centers, using walk stitches to get from brown piece to brown piece. So I do a single line center, walk over, single line walk, single line walk, you know, work your way through it. And then when you get down there, walk to one end, do one of these bars, right? And then go do another one. And you just build forward. Like I said, I personally prefer to kind of redraw this in cartoon format, if you will. Just so I have an idea of what threads and what level of detail I'm going to try to put in it. Because thread doesn't blend, right? It's not like a watercolor. We can't take one thread and melt it into another thread, right? They literally sit next to each other or on top of each other. So if you're trying to do blends, you've got to pay a lot of attention to things to try to get it to look realistic without overdoing the densities. All right. What's the best way to digitize squares on hats? Trial and error. Hats have a bend to it, right? So you can, of course, add pull compensations and things like that. But if I were just to draw a square, and I did it as a vector, sorry, whatever. All right, so I drew a square and I went to go sew this. If I sew it flat, it'd be a square mostly, right? As long as I have proper underlay and pull. But when it goes on a hat, the hat is angled, right? And it's curved. So when it actually goes to sew, my guess is most of the time it ends up sewing out like that. Or, I always have to think about these things. Or, yeah, usually sew, or like that, flared out. I don't remember. I know circles look like eggs, right? So, yeah, in order to get it to actually sew like a square, you're likely going to have to distort the shape. And for each hat, run it out and see, does that look like a square yet? So those sorts of things. So I know circles, when you go to sew them out on hats, they end up looking like eggs. So if I just took a plain circle and sewed it on a hat, it would end up looking like this. So to fix it, I would actually need to sew it a little bit wider. So that comes with just experience and trial and error. And unfortunately, it changes based on what hat you're sewing on, because some of them are really angled, some of them are low profile, high profile, some are more upright. It just depends on the actual construction of it. Rusty, when sewing a circle design, are there certain pull compensations so that it doesn't get oblong? I actually distort the designs and test it out. That's how I do it. So just like I did here, I'll actually distort it to be a different way, sew it out and see what it does. I started doing that a long time ago with laser engraving, because when you laser engrave, it ends up looking silly. So you actually have to distort the designs in order to get them to look correct. Okay. I don't understand the cap thing people reference when digitizing for Puff. Oh, sorry. I'm sitting there going cap thing. Okay, so it's easy to show with the letter T. All right, so if I were going to go sew this, not that this font is set up for Puff, but just pretend this is Puff. Well, when I lay my Puff down, what is actually cutting the Puff? All right, what's cutting the Puff is the needle penetrations. So as this is sewing side to side, you know, it's going from this stitch down here, making a stitch, back and forth, it's cutting the Puff. But what about this edge right here? And this edge right here? And that edge right there? There's no needle penetrations, which means that Puff is not getting cut because it's not being stabbed by the needle 1,000 times. So if I go to rip this Puff off, it's not going to come off because it's still attached to everything underneath there. So you have to cap it. What we mean by that is you're going to have to go underneath this, and I put it on top so you could see it, but you're going to have to go under here and sew stitches in this direction so that you have needle penetrations around here, capping that. So this actually would go underneath and be part of the digitizing, but you're going to cap that edge so that it ends up having needle penetrations along there so that the Puff can be ripped off, right? Without that, it's not going to work out well for you. The other way you can do it is by pinching an edge. The easiest way to show that, I don't know, an S usually. So on here, again, this edge is open, right? But if I'm going to go convert this to wireframe so I can monkey with it. So on these stitch directions, instead of having the stitch direction there, actually, that's done as a column too. I can't show it with there. All right, so let me convert this over to a fill. There we go. All right, so now it's a fill, just so I can show you. I can take this stitch direction right here and pop it over like this. And now it's pinching the points. So all the stitches are coming over to one point. So again, rather than leaving the edge here with no needle penetrations, the stitches are rotating around, and now I have needle penetrations along this edge. The Puff will cut, right? So if I leave it this way, I'm gonna have to do something underneath to get a set of stitches right here to be able to rip that and cap that end, or I'm gonna have to pinch it like this. All right, so that's when you're digitizing per Puff. That's what they're talking about. You either have to cap it underneath or pinch the edge. There's some good digitizing articles in the help section that go over that sort of thing as well. All right, let's see. So my YouTube, did that help? Hopefully. All right, so let's see. All right, when doing a logo, I'm just scrolling through the questions to make sure I get them. When doing a logo on a cap front and doing names on hat sides, for DS, what's the easiest way to bring up the designs and names to eliminate multiple design files? I would do it. So you're having cap front and names on the side. All right, let's set it. I'm going to set one up. Let's do it. Go away. Go away. All right. Open. All right. So first off, let's turn on the hat hoop. Oof. Let's see, WACF. All right. Let's say I want my logo. I'm going to just draw blocks of where I want them. Oops, that was supposed to be a vector. Oh well. Let's say my logo is, I don't know, 3 inches wide and 2 inches tall, whatever my logo might be. Or it's going to fit in that space. All right. So this will have a point in a second. All right. So let's say I have that, and then I want the name located. I've measured on that hat, and I want it 4.5 inches away from the center, like centered there, right? So that means right there. All right, so my name is going to be centered 4.5 inches away from my center of my logo, from the center of the hat. That's just where they need to be positioned. Okay, so all this is art, so I have it positioned relative to my first logo. So I want my name centered over here, and then I want my logo centered here. Cool. So I'd come over here and name, and let's say for that name, you can come over here and tell it to be a text box, and you can specify the height and width. So again, let's say you decided that you wanted your name to be no taller than 1 inch. I'm just guessing here. So 1 inch and 3 inches wide. All right, so if I come to this guy, I can go properties. I can say 3 inches wide, 1 inch tall. All right, so all that did was create a box. So as I change my name, it'll stay fit to that size that I specified. Okay, so whether it's a big name like that, or if I change this to there, it'll be bigger, right? Things like that. So you can specify a text box shape for there. And then this guy, these two can be centered. So I can select there, and say center it. And now my name is always going to be centered to that box that I pre-positioned. So from here, what can you do about it? You can use group names, right? So when you use group names, you would type in whatever names you want. Jeff, Kathy, I don't know, whatever names you want. Select these all, move them over, hit apply, okay. This is now set as a group name. My logo, I'm just going to make this block for simplicity's sake. We're going to call this a logo. And there's my name. All right. All of this done, what do we actually have to answer your original question? How do I eliminate files? Well, if I go into the group names, I can come over here and say, all right, how do I want to create files? Design, name, repeat. So that will sew the design, then the name, and then it will go back, resew the design, and then sew the next name. Then it will resew the design, and then it will sew the next name. So I can actually save this, file, save as, and the only way you'll actually see it is if I save it as an expanded. If I save it as OFM, it won't show up right. So I'm just going to save it as that and go open it. Group names. Notice now I've got a whole bunch of things. I've got my sewing, and then my first name, sewing, second name, right? And I had a artifact in there, but there you go. So you can see it makes one file. So how do you actually program it? You end up saving it as on the machine when you load it, color 1, color 2, because it's a 2-color design, how I have it right now, and then you'd hit hold. So one file can show all of it. You would put your first item on, so file logo name, put the next one on, logo name, so on and so forth. I would suggest just saving them all out as separate files. The reason being, hats you have to adjust individually side to side, and if you don't remember to, when you put the second one on, adjust it, hit the keypad to tell it this is my new starting point, it'll go back to wherever the first hat was, and now you just lost a hat because it changed location of it. So anyway, that would be my suggestion for those. But yeah, so group names, they're fun, pretty straightforward to do. What else? So Beth, did that help? Heck Drippy. For some reason, the shadow icon and border on your sidebar does not appear. Shadow icon. Oh, these two? What version of software do you have? Those were not in there on the prior versions, right? So these icons here are new to the new version of the software. The shadow button, the feature was there in prior versions. It's just here. It's not a button. The border icon is new. In the previous version of this, the only one that was there was the primer. So it really depends on what version you have as to whether those buttons are available to you. So this one is DesignShop 12. So it has the border and primer. DesignShop 11 has primer. DesignShop 10 and sooner does not. Okay. Yeah, no problem, Beth. So, Heck Drippy, does that help? I don't know what version you have to be able to help, but if you have this version, version 12 and 12 professional, and it's not there, come over here, right click on any of these and say reset layout, and it'll reset the toolbar. So in case you accidentally closed one of these, it'll pop them back up and put them back where they're supposed to be. Okay, cool. Well, for having one question, I've talked for 50 minutes. That was great. Thanks for asking so many good questions today. What else can I help with before we call it a day? Just looking over here, making sure nothing else came in. I am freezing. I'm in Florida and I'm always cold. It's ridiculous. All right. Well, I guess nope, someone didn't type in. I'm gonna make sure both of these. Yeah, there we go. Cool. All right. So I think those are all the questions that I saw. If you guys have any questions, don't forget we have a form online, and that's where I'm looking for questions every week. So any time of the day, you forget something, go type it in. Where can you find that? So if you don't want to go find an old episode to find the link to be able to type it in, let me show you how you can get there. All right, so if I go to the Melco service site, right? So melco-service.com, right? I can click on the FAQ, Design Shop. The very first thing is that Design Shop Talk episodes. And then right there is the topics. It'll take you to the little Q&A, fill it in, upload any things, and that way it'll show up. And when I go to pull the questions, I'll have them there. Any examples you have, you can put them in there. So if I need to go create something or go research something, I have it ahead of time. All right. So yeah, submit your questions. And that way you don't have to wait for me to post on social media. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining today. I will be back next Thursday and see what else we can talk about. Have a fantastic weekend. I've got a regatta this weekend, so that's going to be fun. This month is nuts. Sorry, we've got one regatta today or this weekend, which is just a scrimmage. The kids have districts, and then states. Then I have a massive competition for me, and then the kids have states. So 5 weeks in a row, all we're doing is competing. It'll be great. All right, everybody, I will talk to you next time. Have fun sewing, and I'll be back. Bye, everyone.